This was the event that was supposed to symbolise the commitment to public services which is at the centre of Mr Blair's bid for a second term. But the dangers of raising expectations is they can be disappointed, as he discovered when he came face to face with the partner of a patient at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Edgbaston.
And you had a terrible evening. We've had a very stressful 24 hours. So what are you going to do? The staff is absolutely incredible on the ward. They can't do enough for the patient. And then you have to be referred down to an A&E unit, which was absolutely diabolical. And he suffered terribly. So would you like to tell me what you're going to do to provide those people with better facilities?
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
I hope you do, because it's absolutely appalling. And if you'd just like to go and have a look at it, then you'll find out just how terrible it really is.
I'm very sorry about the situation.
No, you're not very sorry, because if you was, you would do something about it.
Mr Blair clearly felt inhibited from engaging in a political argument with a woman who was so obviously overwrought about her partner, who suffers from a form of lymphatic cancer.
The extra investment we're putting in, not just into cancer services, but into heart service as well. Now, I know it takes some time. Of course it takes time to get the staff that we need.
An absolute horrendous 24 hours, and it was made him far worse than what it was.
I appreciate that.
Because he couldn't get a bed on his usual bone marrow transplant ward, and we had to go to A&E and stand in a corridor for half an hour before they gave him a bed, and he could hardly stand up. So what are you going to do about that? Yes, you're going to do something, can't you? But not because you won't. Excuse
if I
me.
can just explain to you what I am going to try and do.
But the manifesto tacitly acknowledges the wider disappointment that Labour hasn't delivered on all the hopes it raised last time.
Hello?
This time, despite the vaulting ambitions of slogan, the message is more sober. A lot done, a lot more to do, indeed enough to do in a third term. The other difference this time is the much greater emphasis on public spending, accompanied by much more explicit acceptance of the role of the private sector in improving the quality of public services.
So this is a great challenge to us as a government and a cabinet, should we be re-elected, and to our public services, indeed to the country. There should be no barriers, no dogma, no vested interests that stand in the way of delivering the very best services for our people. Pupils do not exist for state schools, but state schools for pupils. The patient doesn't exist for the National Health Service, but the National Health Service for the patient.
As far as the private sector is concerned, the manifesto says Labour will consider private-public partnerships in British nuclear fuels and transport. It also envisages using private hospitals for NHS operations and private companies using the new specially built surgical centres, and on education, private companies taking over failing schools.
There is nothing more important for us. We are putting in the money. That is our commitment to public services, made absolutely clear. But we also need fundamental change in the way that they work. And if we don't make those changes, then the money that we put in will not be used for the benefit of whether it's the patient or the pupil or the victim of crime.
The big ideological divide with the Tories is over public spending. The manifesto talks of pouring money into public investment, but it repeats the pledge not to increase the basic or top rate of tax. And Mr Blair certainly doesn't believe in old Labour's kind of equality. Will you do more to use the tax system in the next Parliament to redistribute incomes between the rich and the poor?
My desire is not to make people who are wealthy poorer. My desire is to make people who are poor more wealthy. And I think that provided we're making the investment in opportunity and targeting the help, particularly on those that don't have many opportunities in society, that is a better way of doing it.
Only one, full employment, of the 10 rather bland ambitions listed in the manifesto couldn't be endorsed by all the political parties. But there are major differences in areas like paternity rights. Mr Blair kept using the word radical to describe his ideas for reform in the civil service and the police. But there are also inevitably fudges. On hunting, it says the House will be given an early opportunity for a free vote, but doesn't promise to force it through the Lords with the Parliament Act. On America's plans for nuclear missile defence, it says merely it will encourage the US to consult with NATO allies. And on proportional representation, it says it will review the experience in Scotland and Wales before any referendum. And on the euro, it sticks to the 5 economic tests, with an added word of reassurance for the Sun today.
But this is not an issue you can bounce anyone on. It is a huge issue of change for our country. And that's the reason why we chose to give the final say to people in a referendum.
Mr. Blair's reluctance to move on Europe was seen by the Liberal Democrats as part of a wider timidity.
It's essentially saying we had 4 years, we had a pretty strong economy behind us, we had a rock-solid parliamentary majority, we know we've disappointed, but give us a second go nonetheless.
The Conservative leader was also heckled today on the stump in Wolverhampton, in his case over asylum. He dismissed it as part of the lively political debate and tried to turn the attack back on Labour.
And what they've been saying today is very similar to what they were saying 4 years ago. But there's no more evidence that they will actually do anything about it than anything they've done over the last 4 years.
If Labour was hoping they'd gain the initiative today, it didn't all go according to plan. This afternoon, the Home Secretary was heckled by the Police Federation.
All the evidence shows, and I've checked this out very carefully, that standards have been maintained. And I don't understand.
One of the vested interests Mr. Blair says he wants to take on in a second term. And tonight, back at the Edgbaston Hospital, Keith Sedgwick applauded his partner's actions. The hospital denied his version of events, but the photo opportunity had been ruined. Today, Mr. Blair has made even more ambitious promises to improve public services. If Labour does win, the manifesto will provide a checklist for holding him to account.